I'm tuning into my guides and helpers because there's something that we would like to share with you to do with the human journey. So what I'm about to describe is something that happens to every single person. So it's universal, it applies to all of us. It's about our universal journey, effectively. And our universal journey begins before we're even conceived, before mother and father have ever got together and had any kind of sexual encounter. This is going all the way back, and really what I'm doing is I'm bringing in the films that you have had on the YouTube channel for quite a long time, which is the multidimensional universe. So the films of the multidimensional universe were there to describe what there is outside of the third dimension. And what I want to focus in on, particularly in this film, is our journey from being a fully multidimensional being to become a being on this planet, and the whys and the wherefores and the really important things that is so helpful to know. And unfortunately no one's ever shared this with you, most likely, and I will definitely be giving thanks to particular people as this goes on, because I've been very much helped by particular encounters I've had with people and with books. So I want to take you on this journey, so let's just go back to that drum again. Just give us a nice drum beat, rather like the heartbeat that we are all so familiar with all the time. So a soul, a human soul, has got an impulse, and the impulse is to incarnate into a human body on planet Earth. So that's where we begin our story. And we begin our story, and I'm going to make the language as simple as possible to make the whole thing straightforward. And the term I'm going to use is the in-between worlds. So the in-between worlds is the word I use to describe in between being off with the source and being fully free multidimensional being and actually being on the planet. So in the in-between worlds, it's a place we go to prepare to have a life, literally. And what we get to do there is we get to meet all the major players that we're going to be able to have significant experiences with in this lifetime. And this is my first credit. It goes out to Robert Schwartz, the author of the book Your Soul's Plan. This is a stunningly good book for this subject. So I'm drawing upon Robert Schwartz, and also I'm drawing upon shamanism in the term of soul contracts. This is what we're going into, and you'll also know there's a film on the UT Shaman channel about soul contracts. You can get into more detail from it there. So let me just keep it to the point. So here's this soul, desires incarnation, and in the in-between worlds, the soul gets to meet all the other key players in their life. And this happens for all souls that are going to incarnate into human being. And what they do is they literally thrash out contracts between each other. And some of these contracts are very straightforward and simple, such as I'm going to have a loving relationship with you and it's going to last for 7 years, 10 months and 2 days. And it can be down to such really challenging things such as I'm going to give you 7 grades of hell. And the reason I'm going to do that is because you're really asking me to do so. So I'm going to give you one little quote from Robert's book where he talks about 2 souls, and they're in the in-between worlds discussing their arrangements, and one soul is begging the other soul to give him a really hard time at a particular age in his life, and the other soul saying, I don't want to do that, I don't want to hurt you, I don't want to put you through such difficult experiences. And the soul continues to say, this is really what I need, and the reason why I need it is I need help, and I need help staying on mission. And this is what the film is all about. The film is all about your mission, because you all came to this earth for a purpose, and it is your purpose, and we call this soul's purpose. And I'd like to do something with you, which is to share my soul's purpose. There are tools available to us to help us with this. One of the most powerful I know of is the tarot. So I've got this tarot deck, which I find incredibly useful, and I'll show you a photograph of the card coming up now. So this is the card which represents my soul's purpose, and I drew this card quite some years ago now. It's called the Eon, and it literally is the person that helps other people to wake up. So ever since I've known my soul's purpose, my life has been so much easier because I've known what I've come here to do. Now some people, it's very difficult to find their soul's purpose, so there are tools like the tarot that you can use to help you find out. Other people, it's simply life unfolding that shows them what their soul's purpose is. But once you know your soul's purpose, that's great. Now, in the in-between worlds, we all know our soul's purpose. We all come here with a particular mission. And each one is very individual, because we're all very individual beings, as we so clearly know. So the idea is the souls make up these contracts. They make these agreements to help each other to get back onto track, because what is happening to us all is before we get born, we get given something which I call the draft of forgetfulness. And the draft of forgetfulness is a metaphor to describe something rather like a drink that one all drinks before actually being born, and that enables you to be born with no memories of past lives, and even more important, no memories of the in-between worlds. Now, this is a very interesting deal we've set ourselves up for, because this is all completely arranged by us, all these fine details. So we deliberately get born into this world not knowing what our soul's purpose is, with the therefore hidden task, the secret task of finding out what it is. And what happens to people very often is they get sidetracked. They get distracted by the beauty of the earth, by relationships, by wonderful experiences they can have, by parties, by all the things that you can do, surfing, and goodness knows what wonderful, wonderful human experiences. And what happens is a lot of people, they actually forget what they're here for. So there are definitely methods to help you reconnect with your soul's purpose. But in the in-between worlds, that's when you're actually forging all this. So the reason why we get into particular relationships sometimes which can be very problematical for us is because that person's actually come to help us in our awakening process. And sometimes we all know that if we're really fast asleep, we need to kick up the ass, and that's what does it for us, and that's it, that wakes us up. So sometimes that's what we arrange to do for each other. I certainly know that when I was married to my wife, we both gave each other really big kicks up the behind, and that really helped to wake each other up. And we so needed that, and it wasn't necessarily easy. So here we are, back in the in-between worlds. These communications have been had, the contracts have been drawn up, and the person is nearly ready to incarnate. They've got all their arrangements in place, and so the next thing that they need to do, and I love the graphics you're going to see for this one, because what they need to do now is they need to find the mother and father. They need to find a sperm and an egg donor that are literally going to create the possibility of physical life for them. And what happens to us as a human soul at this point, completely free but focused in on the planet Earth, because this is where it's all going to happen, what they do is they rush around at incredible velocities looking for the parents that they need. And very often, in fact, actually I would say pretty much always, these parents are part of the soul contracts. So they're going to provide this new soul with the perfect upbringing, perhaps a little bit of neglect, perhaps a little bit of extra tender nurturing, perhaps a little bit of abuse. Who knows what it is that the person requires for their particular development. Whatever it might be, they actually have arranged all this, and they're looking for exactly the right combination, the right living conditions, the right environmental circumstances, the right part of the world, the right environmental climatic conditions. All these are being searched and searched and searched, and they find the right couple that are in the act of doing what is the most sacred human act, which is they're having sexual relationship, they're having sex. And at that moment, when the soul finds the right couple, that's when the soul incarnates. And that is such an important and amazing moment. Just imagine what that's like when the soul actually makes a choice, because once that choice has been made, that's it, and they're now on the track. And it's a 9-month track from conception to birth. We're all very familiar with this, and it takes its own course. And it could well be that there may possibly be traumas in the pregnancy. If that's the case, then these have also been contracted in the in-between worlds. So what I'm inviting you to do, and it's a big thing, I'm inviting you to take total 100% responsibility for absolutely everything that happened from even before you conceived, because the idea is that we made these arrangements before we conceived, and we have the pregnancy. All the things that may happen to us in the pregnancy are all part of what we've contracted for our experience. So the question that you could be asking at the moment is, why would any human being choose to experience any form of suffering? It seems a perfectly reasonable question, doesn't it? And yet, in a sense, the answer is almost a laugh, because this is what you need to remember. When you are a multidimensional being, You are completely free, and you can enter and occupy any and all dimensions in space and time simultaneously. And you are experiencing all the time universal unconditional love. Now, if you think about what life on planet Earth is like, it's one of the most beautiful planets. It's possibly the most beautiful planet, and yet there's so much suffering. The conclusion is, yes, this has been contracted, this has been arranged. So to answer the question, why would beings in a state of grace and universal unconditional love choose suffering, choose to experience episodes of not love? The answer is to give them contrast. And this is such an important quality, because you know this yourself. If you've had a period of time where, say, for quite a long period of time, you don't have much money and you can't eat very fancy food and you're eating just the very, very basics, the bare minimum just to survive and keep yourself going, to balance the books, and suddenly some money comes in and you think, right, I'm going to go and buy myself some special treats now. I'm going to take somebody out to dinner in a fine restaurant. You know that the experience of that food is so delicious, it's so wonderful, because you've had that period of time beforehand where you've been eating very simply. Well, it's the same thing. We choose to experience a lot of episodes of not love in our lives, and this gives us a contrast and enables us to enjoy the rapture of full, wonderful love, particularly in the physical body. So this is an ironic thing, but we all come here to experience episodes of not love in our lives. So that's a lot of what it's all about that we're doing. So we've got to the point of ready for birth, and mother's ready to give birth, and the waters break, and the birth either takes place in hospital, which could be a wonderful or maybe a very hostile environment, depending on the temperature of the room, the business, the lights, the sounds and noises. It could be quite an uncomfortable birth, or it could be a wonderfully easy birth, perhaps in water, perhaps in a wonderful part of the world where it's by a lake, and the temperatures are ambient human body temperatures. Who knows? Whatever birth it is that person has, whatever birth you've chosen, that's it. And you then enter into the physical world. But let's just go back. Let's go back into that pregnancy and just take a moment in there. Just look what the baby's experiencing. It's a brand new soul. And the soul is completely enclosed in this wonderful womb. And the womb is providing all the nutrients. It's providing cushioning with the amniotic fluid. The temperature is constant. It's absolutely ideal. And here's another miracle about human creation, is that even women who don't have ideal diets, their babies, by and large, fare incredibly well. Everything is done with the miracle of the human mother, her nurturing abilities to give the baby everything the baby requires. There are rare exceptions, such as the alcoholic or the heroin-addicted mother, and then the babies do come into this world with issues, that's true. But I'm talking about the vast majority of cases. So we have the vast majority of cases, that human being, that beautiful new soul, has been kept so warm and so safe in the womb, and now is a time to leave. So this is the very first shock. And here's my big point. My big point is, even if you have the most perfect birth in the world, it's still to some extent a shock, because the amniotic fluid drains away. Suddenly there is no cushioning, it's gone. That young soul is still inside the womb. The contractions are starting, and the baby's got the very simple choice, because the choice is to fight the contractions or to go with them. And the vast majority of the time, if the baby's in a degree of relaxation, the baby simply goes with the experience. And eventually the baby's born. So here you are as a brand new baby. As a brand new baby entering into the world. Now you're experiencing true full physicality in the third dimension. No cushioning. And this is what you are in at this moment in time. You are innocent. You are pure. And your existence is in a state of grace. You are manifesting universal unconditional love automatically, because it's all you've known outside of an incarnation on this planet, back in the in-between worlds, at the source, travelling throughout the wider reality, in all the dimensions. That's what you've been experiencing all the time, universal unconditional love, and you bring it with you. So here's the first of my suggestions for you, which is something I strongly recommend you to do at some point, is to seek out someone with a new baby and spend a little bit of time around that baby. Observe the baby, enjoy the way the baby behaves, enjoy just looking at the nature of the face. Look deeply into the baby's eyes in the outside light and notice how phenomenal the soul's eyes are, innocent, pure, in a state of grace, manifesting universal and unconditional love. That is really quite something. And so this is how we all begin, pretty much. And then what happens is we get taken on the ride, and our human ride is to start to really experience very, very deeply this human contrast, which starts to include all the qualities of not love. Now, the parents of this child, one or two, or in some cases neither, when this job is taken over by other people, the carer of the child or carers have one task. Their task is to explain to this soul how the world works. And in order to do this, ideally they want to manifest these two qualities. They need to manifest the quality of nurturing. This is completely understandable. Nurturing and support, essential. And the other quality, equally essential, they need to challenge this young soul. So support plus challenge to love. And this is what they are inevitably, intuitively bound to produce. So it works in such a simple way. All the basic needs of the baby are met: food, changing the nappy, sleep, all the rest of it. And then the boundaries need to be laid down, and they start quite early in life. You have to wait a moment. That's hot, don't touch. And this is the beginning of what I call the process of domestication. So we begin innocent and pure, and our domestication process is described in great detail by certain shamanic lineages. So I now specifically want to thank Don Miguel Ruiz and all other Toltec shamans. What Toltec shamans do is they give us a really accurate, precise framework by which to understand all this. And Don Miguel Ruiz's book called The Four Agreements and the companion workbook are an excellent place to start. If you want to really explore this in some considerable detail, I strongly recommend it. My shaman brother and myself spent 3 months, a whole autumn, delving very deeply into all this, researching it, and we got so much benefit from this work. So the domestication process is now described. The carers of this baby, of this young child, what they do is they start to educate, to train, to explain the world to the child. And it means explaining about boundaries, because if we've been multidimensional with no boundaries, what a shock. You've got to learn about boundaries. Actually, if you crawl over that edge, you could fall off and injure yourself. So this is very natural and very normal. And yet there's something else which is thrown in, because as well as all the essential life and death things which the parents or the carers are naturally conveying to the child, they're also conveying a load of other material too, and they can't help it because they've got their own domestication process which they were inculcated with. And generally speaking, a lot of it is actually quite toxic. In fact, some of it's extremely toxic. And this comes into particularly the universal soul retrieval here, because one of the main things I work with, stage 2 of the USR, as most of you know now, it's curse removal. So inevitably what parents or carers of the young child do, this innocence in a state of total grace, they end up cursing this young soul, and they end up saying, you mustn't do that, you are this, you are that, and words and judgments start to come out. And over a period of time, this beautiful innocent becomes domesticated. And what happens is a domestication process is where the dark side is really fully engaged in terms of its hostile nature with this young soul, because all the difficulties start to come out. So this dark side manifests itself in all sorts of ways. And the very first one that it starts to manifest quite clearly when you think about it is that the child starts to develop what I would call an image of perfection. So here I am, I'm a young child, and my image of perfection is if I do exactly everything that my carers want, then they won't shout at me, they won't hit me, they won't give me harsh looks, they won't tell me off, they won't curse me, they won't judge me, they won't give me 7 grades of hell. And this is what we do. We become from the free child to the adapted child, and our adaptation actually is the beginning of this domestication process. So we create an image of what we should be. and we actually violate our true nature, and we become what it is that other people want us to be and demand us to be. So we are extra careful, we don't run across the road, we obey the green crossroad. We actually rein in our desire to just take risks, and over the years, as time goes on, this works its way through into more aspects of our life. So the next thing that tends to happen to us is we get what I would call a book of law being created. It's rather like everybody writes their own rule book about the rules for human beings. So basically, if I tell a lie, I'm going to get a hard time from my carers, and especially if they catch me. If I tell a lie and they don't catch me, I might be all right. And you learn all these things and you write them all down, metaphorically speaking, in your consciousness, until after quite a long time has gone by, you become even more of an adapted human being, and your true essence is even more diluted. So what the Toltecs do is they describe this process as a foreign installation, and they give a rather dramatic term. I actually think it's quite melodramatic, but nonetheless it grabs the attention. What they say is happening is that the human being is in the process of having something installed into them fundamentally against their free will, and they call it the parasite. And this parasite, with time, takes on a life of its own, and until the end you reach the stage where a human being has been right through the domestication process. The first people that begin the process are definitely the caregivers, whether they are parents or otherwise. The next that come in are the peers, brothers, sisters, close family friends. They also put in their own influences, which includes all the curses that we're familiar with from the curse removal work and universal soul retrieval. We then take it further still, and at some point, in most cultures, the child ends up going to school. And now we can really amp up that process of domestication. And because the teachers may have very loving feelings for the child, but they don't have the same connection as the caregivers, usually that's when the domestication process starts to get tougher still, and the child receives more and more information about the do's and don'ts of being a human being. So first of all, we had an image of perfection which is being created, and by the time you get to be an adult, this tends to be ruling you pretty much all the time. So my image of perfection says, in order to attract a mate, I need to be the perfect boyfriend or the perfect girlfriend, because then hopefully I can get to be the perfect fiance, and I get to be the perfect husband and wife, and eventually I might get to be the perfect mother and father. And this is the way they behave, and I'm going to do everything I can to live up to this model. This is the way pretty much all of us tend to operate so long as we're asleep. And of course this film is all about the awakening process. As long as you're asleep, fully domesticated, this is what's going on. You're literally running somebody else's program. So that was the first thing, image of perfection. Second thing is you've got this rule book, the book of the law, that you're writing and adding pages to every day. They bring out the third component. The third component is called the judge. And the judge, it's rather like I'm a human being and I don't have to worry about whether or not there are police in my society, because I've got my own policeman sitting on my shoulder, and this policeman is judging every single thing I do. Well, that was right, that's wrong, you shouldn't have said that, your whole presentation, that little bit was completely wrong, you need to do that bit all over again. And this is the way the judge works. The judge works by policing ourselves, and the judge most emphatically works when it comes to our opinions about other people. And if you only have to go to, for example, a pub and listen to people gossiping, maybe hairdressers or just the street, and what are you listening to? You're listening to people passing judgment about other people. Oh, you should see what she was doing last Saturday night when she went down the pub and she drank this and she did that and she got on the table and I don't know, and they just go on and on and on. So yes, we all know poison is a gossip, and we need to give compassion to people who are gossips, because basically this installation, this parasite, has got them completely by the short and curlies. They're fast asleep, they're running this program, they've got no idea whatsoever this is what they're doing. So as time goes on, the child continues to grow, and we've got caregivers, parents possibly, we've got peers, we've got teachers, and the school institution. The actual institution of the school has got its own laws and rules which the child is then subjected to, and there are punishments for misdemeanors obviously. And then we go further out into society until we eventually reach government, and so government is actually part of the domestication process. So by the time somebody turns 18 and is old enough to vote, what they have been through is something which is so phenomenally punishing that every one of us just needs to give ourselves a big pat on the back, because you can say to yourself, I survived, I'm still here, I'm alive. However, at what cost? And that's what we're here to look at now. We're here to look at the cost of all this. And the cost is pretty heavy, because this installation, this fine installation, is known by various names. Some people might refer to the ego. I quite like the term rational mind. And one of the phrases that my teacher loves to use, and I'm just going to share it with you, this is one to remember: the mind plays tricks and games. The mind plays tricks and games. And so it does. So this fine installation, at this point, it's got to the point where that person actually has forgotten completely that they are a soul, limitless, multidimensional, and they identify so much with this image of perfection that actually they've sold into it hook, line and sinker, and they think they are their ego. So at this point the person's fast asleep, reached the age of majority, and they are completely convinced that their ego mind is all there is. And they're running the program constantly on an hour by hour, minute by minute basis, responding to everything that happens to them in life by a set of pre-programmed responses, until something happens. And at some point, and thank goodness, the great thing about the fact that it's 2013 is the awakening process is happening to people earlier and earlier and younger and younger. And there are souls coming through with much less toxicity in their programming, and this means that they can be waking up as young children. So it's an interesting thing. Wide awake as babies, we gradually start to yawn as we get older, until we finally, when this installation is fully installed, and we're fall asleep and we're nodding off, and then we go into this fast asleep mode, and we're operating on reaction. And in this time, this is when it's most likely we're going to succumb to negativity. These curses which we've been taking in from all directions and all sides over those years start to actually manifest. And if a person hears the phrase "you are stupid" often enough, it's terribly sad to say, but yes, they manifest the quality of stupidity. Just think about the depth of that. Now I need to take several steps back, and I need to go into the position of the parents, because this is all sounding very one-sided, and I need to now look at the situation of the parents, because the parents is caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. There's Hobson's choice for the parents. On the one hand, the parents wants to give the child all the love and all the nurturing, all the care. On the other hand, this child must be made safe and socialized. The child needs to know that if the child takes the trousers down and starts fondling with the genitalia in a public place, people are going to be freaked out. So some rather stern measures about the way I speak to my child might be necessary to make sure they don't do it again. You can see the terrible dilemma the parent is in. So all parents deserve huge, massive pats on the back, because this is what they've done. They have had their own programming which has caused them to fall asleep. They love this child most of the time. Some of the times they don't, and we deal with that. But nonetheless, the situation is they're doing their best. And this is the thing to remember: if you're a child of a parent, which we all are, and we all feel critical towards our parents at different times, well, just remember what their circumstances were, what their upbringing was like. They did the best that they could do, and that's some place to go to. So here's an important place to go to with all this, because it might sound as if I'm being very critical of the ego, the rational mind, the fine insulation. Actually, not at all. Because this fine insulation can be turned into your ally. It can be turned from literally a slave driving master, which is calling the shots every moment, to being one of the best allies that you've got. And I guess this is what the awakening process is all about. So we begin our awakening process by being fast asleep. Then things will happen to us. We will meet people, we will have encounters, we'll have interactions. 1999, Keith is in a cinema watching The Matrix. Bingo! Massive awakening moment. Only one of many. I've had a whole series of awakening moments through my life. 1992, going into Glastonbury Festival, another massive awakening moment for me, when I witnessed my first fire show and took part in my first sweat lodge. And so it goes on. We've all got these individual moments in our lives where we did something, or something happened to us, or we saw something, and it catalysed an awakening. So I rather like to use the model of the tide, because when it's low tide and the tide turns and the tide starts to come up, what do we get? We get the waves, and the wave comes up and it goes down, up and it goes down. And if you stand watching it for 3 minutes, there's no appreciable movement. Stand there for 3 hours and you can see, sure, the waves are definitely coming up. So it's like this an awakening process. From the point of view of complete fast asleepness, we get a series of shocks. I'd like to use the word shocks because that's pretty much what they are. Whether they're gentle or harsh, they're still shocks, and they're shocking us back into awakening. And when I saw those tubes pop out of Neo when he crawled out of that fluid-filled cavity, it really struck a chord with me. So I'm so grateful to the mass media out there who are, consciously or otherwise, giving us wonderful awakening opportunities. At this point in the film, I particularly want to thank Chris for his contribution to the inspiration to make this film. And it was a disagreement we had between each other, a conflict, and out of that conflict came the realization this film would need to be made. So here we have the situation of someone starting to waken up, starting to awaken into the true nature of who they are, the fact that they are a universal soul that has existed since time beyond reckoning, way beyond clock time, because actually outside of the planet Earth, clock time doesn't even exist. So in eternal time, this is what we all are. We're starting to awaken up to the fact there's something more to us than the pre-programmed responses. Now, there are certain practices which you can engage in, which things you can actually take up, and these are going to be very helpful for you in your awakening process. One of the simplest ones which I've shared on a number of films is the breathing technique. That is so useful to help you to wake up. It literally increases your psychic development. It's a really good tool. So now I want to just delve on into the notes I've got and come up with the others for you. So here's the first and simplest technique you can make use of. Bearing in mind that this foil insulation, its inevitable tendency is to take over. It wants to take you over. It wants to take you over because it knows it's got no true substance. It knows it's ephemeral. This is it, you see. The real you is eternal, lasts forever. But this is an ephemeral foil which has got a limited validity. So it wants to perpetuate itself. So what we can do is, rather than allowing it to run the show, not allowing it to be the master or in charge anymore, what we can do is, it's called, the principle is directed labour. You give it something to do. And thanks and blessings to my mother Joyce at this moment, because this is what my mother used to say to me when I was a child growing up. She would say, "You to loose ends, do the washing up. You're depressed, do the washing up. Are your hands dirty, do the washing up. Whatever it was that the problem was, are you bored, do the washing up." And it was great because she was giving me a simple physical task which I could do. And at the end of the washing up process, I could look at the drying rack and I could see, well, those dishes are now clean. That made me feel that little bit better about myself. So it's a way you, an example of what you can do is you can give your ego or your rational mind or your parasite, your foreign insulation, whatever you want to call it, you can give it jobs to do. Now that's a very simple thing. Another thing you can do, suppose you're in a situation where you want to concentrate on something and you're being distracted, you can give your rational mind a little job. You can say, okay, just count all the number of dots on the carpet and I'll just carry on thinking this problem through, whatever it might happen to be. So you can give your rational mind anything from you could give it something like, okay, divide 22 by 7 and work out what the number pi is to 50 decimal places. Anything at all that you like, as practical or as abstract as you like, but the idea is you're giving this rational mind something to occupy, and then you can get on and do what you want to do. The other thing is to engage in activities which bring you into whole fullness, and particularly to harmonise the left and the right side of the brain. The left side of the brain is very much to do with the analytical, rational side, and the right side is very much to do with the creativity side. If you are doing any of the 3 activities I'm going to mention, if you are singing, if you are dancing, if you are having sex, automatically your left and right hemispheres are in complete synchronization. So these are very, very helpful things to do to allow you to taste your full humanity and just let go of the demands that the rational mind has. And sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and my rational mind starts going at me straight away, and what about this and what about that, and it starts issuing forth judgments, and I don't know about this, and opinions, and starts criticising what someone did last night. Sometimes I wake up in the morning with that going on, and I think to myself, you see the magic moment? The magic moment is I get to the point of awareness that is happening. As soon as I can clock it, as soon as I can spot it, I can say to myself, right, rational mind is trying to horn in on my consciousness and take control here, right? I've noticed it. That's the first big step. Second thing I can do, I can literally direct compassion and love towards that part. Just send it some love and compassion, and then I can go on about my day. I can think, right, well, I want to step out of bed now and I want to have a wash, and I can enjoy the experience of washing, and I can put my consciousness into the complete awareness of maybe rubbing the soap or drying myself afterwards or preparing the breakfast, whatever it is. When I'm engaged in physical activities, it's taking me out of that domination of that rational mind. It's putting me back in charge again, because I'm getting into doing something physical and I'm aware emotionally how it feels and how it feels kinesthetically. I'm enjoying it. This is all a way to bring you back into being you again. So these are helpful things you can do, and they're very, very simple, aren't they? Now let's take things quite a long way off and let's go towards the other end of the spectrum. If you are serious about your awakening process, something you can choose to do is you can choose to take up a practice, an ancient traditional practice like meditation, yoga, tai chi, qigong, something like that. And if you do it daily, you'll get much better benefit, no question about it. Or simply the breathing technique I have shared with you in different films. If you take something like that up as a daily practice, you'll find that the discipline will do you enormous good. It will give you a strengthened intent, and anything you wish to achieve in your life will be easier as a result. However, the main thing is you'll get to experience this issue with the rational mind, and particularly if you do meditation sitting with just simple breathing and just observing the breath. That's the simplest way I can think of to meditate. That's probably the most challenging of all, because there's nothing else to distract. And what's going to happen, and as the rational mind is going to come in and have a field day with you, going to come up with all sorts of opinions and judgments and what happened last night and what could happen in the future and worries and fears, and these all come up in the meditator. And what the meditator does is the meditator gives compassion to that quality and returns the focus of attention to the breathing. They don't load themselves with any judgments. They don't say, oh, I'm a bad meditator. That's totally not the way it is. So with meditation, you completely accept your so-called imperfections when you're not following the image of perfection of the meditator. So whenever you wang off into whatever sides track it happens to be, you accept it, you give the compassion, and you return the awareness to the breathing, if that's the simplest meditation technique you're doing. If you take something like this on, it's phenomenal how this is going to benefit you in your awakening process. The other thing you can do is you can get into relationships with various plant spirits. These can be extraordinarily helpful for people in their awakening times. For other people, simply being in service to other people. Such a simple thing. You can be doing something as simple as I said before in the film, as smiling at the person at the checkout, through to doing a random act of kindness of great detail and complexity for a total stranger. You know, these are all really great things. You know of an old person down the street that they really have been feeling sad that their garden's in such a mess and they've got such bad arthritis they can't get down and reach anymore because the person said so 3 weeks ago, you remember? And you think, I've got to spare a couple of hours, I'll knock on the door. I don't mind having a go at your garden this morning. All this sort of thing. I think that the Indian tradition, they call this Dharma, being in service to other people. At this point, I want to say a really big thank you and a big up to Buddhism and to Tibetan Buddhism, which has got huge roots in shamanism. These are all useful practices you can take up, which will help you. The other thing you can do is to give yourself time off from the busyness of everyday life. Go and take some time away from your normal life. Even better, if you possibly can, go on a retreat. These are incredibly useful things you can do. You can get to learn more about yourself on a 3-day retreat than you can living possibly for 3 years in your daily practice, because it gives you a different perspective, rather like on the film I was sharing to do with the shit to gold one. You look at things from a different position. Very, very useful. You get to see things from a totally different perspective on the retreat. That's certainly something that you can do. So what I've been inexorably leading you towards the point is the point where when you get into a pattern of ego starts to take control, I know I'm not my ego, I give my ego some compassion, I find my way to extricate myself, you will eventually reach the situation where the ego will realize that the very best thing the ego can do is to become your ally. Now I find that when I run all my events, my ego is my #1 ally. It's constantly helping me all the time with practicalities, such as you've actually got 25 minutes to get that food prepared before people are going to be ready to do this particular thing, and then at 2 o'clock you're going to need to take them all out there. It's wonderful. It keeps me on track. It keeps me on pace. So there are really great advantages when your ego is your ally, because it means to say you've got this part of you that is actually helping you manage your time if you've got a lot to do in a short space of time, or manage your ability to handle materials, to really keep your skills up to par in your particular career or chosen profession, whatever it is. This is where your fine insulation is really now your ally. Supposing you're someone who's a joiner and you work with wood and you're doing really well and you're honing your technique, and then you get a new wood to work with and different tools. This is where your rational mind is going to be very helpful for you, because this ally will be able to come up with ideas about how you can best use the tools in a different way to work with this different quality of wood. Whatever it is that you've got presented with, your rational mind can be a really great helper. Now, I'm making this film very shortly after the most recent retreat, and I'm very, very grateful now to Michael L. And what Michael shared with me is this. He describes this process of the foreign insulation is completely running the show to starting to wakening up, this whole awakening process, realizing how much control this part has been having. He calls it the beautiful war. And in a sense, it's a strange thing to say, but I actually really resonate with this. It is a beautiful war, because in a sense, what's been going on for all these years before your awakening process started was a war between this bit that's been trying to control and dominate you with all these beliefs and programmings, versus actually you, with you, because you came here on a divine mission. Don't forget, I mentioned that earlier on in the film. This is why you are here. In a sense, you can say literally, you are a mission from God, and you are an aspect of God because you are a component of the source. If that's the case, that you are a mission from you. And when you get to know what your mission is, it's wonderful. And my personal experience is that if your mission involves helping other people, or animals, or plants, or the landscape, or pretty much anything, if it's helping, you've got yourself the golden ticket, because you've got that wonderful reassurance of feeling good about yourself, which just keeps on generating. You keep on being helpful, it keeps on generating this reservoir of goodwill. And that's something else that's very important, because if we do generate our reservoir of goodwill and we nurture it by the actions we're doing, it just makes the world one beautiful place and one peaceful world. Whereas when we're stuck in the programming and the carping and the criticism and the judgments and the pointing the finger out at other people and labelling them and all that stuff, that's just all part of more of the same old stuff, the same old, same old. So every single human being on this planet is actually in the process of awakening, because it's 2013, it's not 1952 or 1428. This is where we're in, we're 2013, so we're all in our awakening process to whatever extent it may be. And what we can do is we can have compassion for all other beings, compassion for all other people that are awakening, because we all know we all do it in our own sweet time. We've got our own soul contracts to run in our own individual way. That's completely appropriate. And this is one of the things that the shaman learns. The shaman knows that if the person comes and asks for help, we can provide the help. But if the person doesn't say, please would you help me out of the dark into the light, we can't do anything. No, because we're actually honouring and respecting that person's path. That person needs to do things in their own way. And when they're ready to ask for help, they will, because they've got their own schedule which they're running perfectly in their own divine timing. So there was a sentence given to me very recently, which is simply this: awareness of rational mind as master is the beginning of wisdom. When you first actually spot that process, that's a very golden moment for you. And I'm about to conclude this film, and Dan's just asked me to speak about something which is then linked into something else, which is to say as follows. Remember, on this glorious journey, which is your individual journey, and your ultimate mission is to be as completely you as possible, and to find a way to free yourself from the programming, to realise that we are all coming from the cosmos, from the wider reality, and in a sense we are literally all angels, because the word angel is used to describe a being that has no physicality whatsoever, and that's where we all come from, and that's where we all return to when we return to the source. So I just want to link in with the fact that there is the Long Angels film, and the price on that one has been reduced down to $2. So if you'd like to explore angels in some depth, you're most welcome to do so with that film. And the link is in the description. So one of my intentions in this film is to show you that by you showing love for your own ego, that's when things really start to work very beautifully for you. So enjoy your journey, enjoy your ride on this wonderful, beautiful blue planet, and thank you very much.